Hey you guys, welcome back to my channel. How are you doing today? I hope you are having a great day so far. So today I'm doing something a little bit different. I am actually going to be sharing and reviewing the new Netflix series called The Pharmacist. It is a documentary series that had just came out not too long ago on Netflix. And today I will be sharing my opinion, reviewing the actual series itself. So if you haven't watched it, here's your warning, spoilers, okay?
Spoilers.
Definitely go check it out. It is something that I would recommend everyone seeing. So again, if you haven't seen it, it's going to be straight spoilers this entire video. So go check it out and then come right back and check out my review. But before we even get into all of that, if you are new here, welcome. This is Journey to Find Kay, and I'm Kay. I like to talk about mental health. I usually react to The Rewired Soul, but I also talk about other topics that I can find here in society if I feel like we can learn a lesson about mental health and or substance abuse, because I'm a mental health patient, worker, and advocate, and I want to use my opinion, my experience to negate some of the negative things that we see on a day-to-day basis. So if you enjoy my content, you enjoy watching me, don't be afraid to hit the subscribe button down below, hit the bell so that way you are also notified every time I post a video. And I also have a Patreon, you guys. You can definitely go check out patreon.com/Journey to Find Kay. Check out all my different tiers, check out all the different perks that you guys get. I just uploaded this past Saturday an exclusive video for my patrons only. So if you want to see what I put up over there and some other exclusive content that they only get to see, don't be afraid to check out my Patreon. I also have a special going on right now until the 14th, which is this Friday at 8 p.m. If you sign up to be one of my patrons, you will get a dedicated shout out in my next YouTube video. Again, no pressure. You just watching my videos, liking, commenting, subscribing is support, and all of it is appreciated. So yeah, you guys, I was actually asked back in January to look into this docu-series from another creator here on this platform, Unmumsy Musings. She is a YouTube creator who does candle hauls. She's awesome. She hit me up on Twitter. You know, I have my favos over there. So if you don't follow me on Twitter, I don't know what you're doing.
I don't know what you're doing.
But she hit me up on Twitter and was like, hey, Kay, I would really like you to watch this. This seems like it might be interesting, especially with my background in mental health. And it's speaking about the opioid epidemic and something that a lot of us are talking about in mental health, outside of mental health, personal lives. A lot of us are affected from this epidemic. So I was like, heck yeah, because when it comes to documentaries, you guys don't even know.
I love documentaries.
I love documentaries. I will sit here and watch a documentary quicker than I will watch anything that comes out in theaters. That's just always been the way that's just always been who I am. So it's not something out of the ordinary for me to actually sit down and watch this documentary. It's probably a docuseries that I would have watched anyway, because it's about substance abuse. It's talking about the opioid epidemic. So I was really excited to actually sit down and watch it. And I did. I sat down, I tweeted out that I was getting ready to just binge it, and I binged it. It's only 4 episodes long, so that's about 4 hours that it took me to watch it. And I'm on vacation. I have nothing better to do but to relax. So when I'm asked if I would be willing to do a review on something that I would most likely watch and make it content for you guys, I mean, that's a win-win situation. So that's what I did today. I sat here, I watched this entire docu-series, and it was so good.
It was so good.
So I'm not going to go too deep into like each episode, but I am going to hit major points that kind of stuck out to me. If you catch me kind of looking this way, it's because I wrote notes. For 4 episodes, it was really good. It was great. It was just something that I enjoy watching. So let's just go straight on into this, because I don't want this to be a super long video. So again, the docu-series was called The Pharmacist. It was on Netflix, and it was just recently actually released earlier this month. And just from the actual trailer itself that made me even more intrigued to watch it, you get the understanding that the man they are talking to is a pharmacist. He started noticing issues with opioids coming through his pharmacy, and he wanted to do something about it, right? So you already have that understanding just from seeing that trailer. So the first episode is actually more of a background story, kind of explaining why this man took this whole epidemic seriously. And I say epidemic because now we understand that's what it is. But at that time, it was just starting. So he was catching on to a trend, I could say, faster than most people were because it was really big in his town. So you walk into this docu-series understanding that. And so the first episode is explaining who he is. You learn that the pharmacist's name is Dan Schneider. He's from Louisiana, St. Bernard Parish to be exact. He's married. Him and his wife had been together a long time. They had 2 kids, a son named Dan Jr. and a daughter, Christy. So you're getting that whole background story of their life, how close they are, and they really focus in on their oldest child named Dan Jr. They explain him going to college. He was him having a girlfriend. They had been together for a long time. During his years in like early college and then after college, he was more, withdrawn from the family. So one night their son says he's going to go out. He was going to go study or meet with a friend, one of those things. And the family was like, okay. He leaves. They go to bed, right? They get woken up in the middle of the night and are told that their son's truck was in the 9th Ward. Where they are located in Louisiana, their parish was really close to New Orleans. They were not that far from each other, maybe within a few miles. And with the area that their son's truck was located at, it was a bad area. Yes, it was a predominantly Black area. It was an area that was hit really bad because this is the 80s at this time. They were hit really bad with the crack epidemic, which was a lot of the big inner cities at that time as well. And so they were kind of confused as to why he was over there. And they didn't know at that time until then when they saw the truck that it was a drug deal. The pharmacist, Dan, his dad, stated that he knew it was a drug deal, didn't even know that his son had any type of an addiction, didn't know that something was going on. And that is at that moment where they find out their son is dead. He had been killed doing a drug deal. So this isn't even halfway through the first episode, and we're seeing what's going on for this family, what caused this man, the pharmacist, to take the opioid situation so seriously later on, because his son had an addiction. He was addicted to crack at that time. They didn't know, they didn't see any type of warning signs. They didn't know what to look for essentially at that time. And now their son was dead. And then with it being such a hard time in that area, that was an area where they did no snitching. You weren't supposed to tell. And it took a long time for Dan, the pharmacist, to find out who killed his son. It was so sad. It was a very sad episode, especially the first half, because this is a family who did not know that their son was hurting, that their son was struggling with addiction, that their son was leaving the home that day. They thought he was just going to go out and be back. And he didn't come back because a drug deal went wrong. And while they're trying to get this solved, while they're trying to solve their son's murder, they're getting hit with different barriers.
Because the police did not care.
The police did not care. This was at that height time of war on drugs.
Even though we're still there now. We're trying to fix it though. We're trying to fix it.
But this was at one of the peak times of the war on drugs. These cops did not care. They did not care that this man's child was killed during a drug bust, because they've dealt with that every day, because they saw it every day. And there was that stigma that we still deal with every day of dirty addicts, and essentially felt like they got what they deserved. So they weren't really trying to help this man find the person who murdered their son. He had to do most of the legwork. Him and his family got on the ground, went into this location that is not welcoming to white people. I'm just going to keep it honest. They say it in the documentary. They're not very welcoming to them. He risked his life because in those types of areas, you don't belong here. You look like a cop. They assume you a cop. They could kill you. I'm not saying that is all of them, but that back then it was very dangerous. There was a lot of crime going on because of the drugs that was in these cities, and that's all over the country. So they walked in there knowing that people are not going to talk to him, but he didn't care. He was like, I'm going to find who killed my son. And I was like, oh, wow, that's probably something that I would do too, because that's my baby. I couldn't even fathom the hurt that he felt. He went door to door. This man did most of the detective work than the actual police did. The police didn't do really anything to try to help him. They said they were helping. They really weren't helping, in my opinion. This is just my opinion. He literally sat down with an old phone book and called everybody who lived within that area and had phone numbers he could find. He went through numbers every day to find someone someone, maybe someone witnessed this murder, and that showed his dedication to get things done. Semi-obsessive a little bit. Yes, I was a little worried. I get that need, because that was kind of his way of grieving, but not really. But if you get what I mean, like that was his way of grieving, because he was focusing that energy into trying to find his son, and that was the only thing he could focus on at that time. That was kind of his way of grieving for the loss of his son. He wanted to get things done when the cops weren't trying to do anything. They were able to pull money together, got a reward. One of the people that sat here and was supposed to be a witness went in and shared that it was this guy, and it actually wasn't this other guy, because he was in jail. So the witness didn't even work out. The cops didn't even try to find anybody else after this time. This man was literally doing all this work on his own. So one day he sat here, this is all in the first episode, you guys, this was crazy. He sat here, he went through the phone book, found someone who actually saw the actual murder, saw the whole thing, said that she called up there to the police. That's why the police didn't want to do nothing. She called up there to the police office, to the police station, to see if they found anyone, if they would call her back. No one came by to see her. No one tried to really work that case. So she was someone who was able to assist them in finding out who the murderer was, and come to find out the murderer was actually the witness that picked, like, these cops messed this whole thing up. These cops messed the whole thing up because they were, I feel like they were afraid. They were afraid to go in there because it was a dangerous part of town. They were maybe stretched thin. Cops back then were corrupt as well. They had shown where these cops were getting indicted for doing shady stuff too. And they slacked, they messed up. And this man literally basically did all of the work to get his son's murderer into jail. It was an emotional episode, and it continued into episode 2, but it was a great backstory. It gave you an understanding as to why he was able to be so deep into the actual opioid epidemic that's going on. So yes, it was a great background story episode. It helped you see and understand the work that he does to get things done, how serious he takes it, how in-depth he takes it. He was recording all the time, recorded everything, starting in his son's case and starting in building his son's case. Now, I did question it for a second, like, what are the laws out there? Are they able to do that? But I don't even know if that was even anything they thought of back then. So he sat there and recorded everything, and that helped his case as well. Like, it showed him setting kind of habits, things that he does that helps him focus and get things done. Now, I have a little bit of issue of that, but we'll get into that later on. Beginning of episode 2 is the ending of basically episode 1, where we find out the person goes to prison and then he goes back to work. He's like, okay, after all of this, I can focus on work. Let me go back to the pharmacy. So he's just working. He's filling prescriptions. That's what he does. That's his job. And then he starts noticing that there are a lot of prescriptions coming in for Oxycontin, for Xanax, for other pain pills. And he's like, yo, what's going on? Why are all of these coming through all of a sudden? And then he would look at the dosages and was like, okay, like, these are high dosages. And he took it upon himself to, because you know, when you go to a pharmacy, sometimes the pharmacist will sit there and have a consult with you, especially if it's a new medication. They usually have you have a conversation with the pharmacist. And so he was noticing who was picking these actual prescriptions up. A lot of them were young. A lot of them seemed like they weren't even that hurt. Now, again, that's a judgment call because we don't know what pain people are going through. And I know, so I know that even though he might have looked and said, hey, they don't look like they should be on this medication, which ultimately was correct, we still don't want to push that narrative that we can look at someone can tell if they're in pain or not, or if they need certain medications. We shouldn't do that. So that was something I didn't like. But he started noticing all of these prescriptions coming in, young people, high dosages. He would consult with them and say, hey, like, what other treatment have you tried that, one, isn't as addictive as opioids, and two, not such a high dosage, because you're at such a high dose. If this stops working, where are you going to go? You don't have any other milligrams to even try to go to because you're so high.
Which is fact.
They were getting like 40 milligrams of Oxycontin in their prescriptions. A lot of them were just like, oh, you know, I have back pain or whatever the case was. He shared different examples, and he was like trying to discourage these people from filling filling these prescriptions, getting the medicine, because it was a lot. He was afraid that ultimately people would get addicted or they could hurt themselves. Accidental overdoses do happen with prescription drugs because they were such high dosages. They shared different experiences from people who were using at that time and stating how they would go to the doctor and get these medications filled, and they would know what pharmacies to go to where people weren't asking questions or they were just filling them, which a lot of times people were just filling them. And that was Dan's actual whole thing. It was that he was having these issues with all of these prescriptions coming in, and he's like asking these people, but he also has his boss who's coming to him and saying, yo, what are you doing? You don't need to do that. Just fill the prescription. Like basically telling him, like, give them their medicine. We don't ask no questions. The doctors know best. He understood it's an opioid. It's addictive. Then they start to explain that a lot of these people that were coming in were getting Oxycontin, Xanaxes, and Somas, which they called the Holy Trinity. Trigger warning for anybody that this might trigger, I do apologize, but they stated that they would get prescribed those 3 medications at the same time, calling them the Holy Trinity because it was the closest you could get with medications, prescription medications, to the feeling of heroin. And he was noticing a lot of people were getting these prescriptions, and then he started paying attention to the doctor. So in this episode, we learned that while he's working at the pharmacy, he sees all of these prescriptions coming in for these Oxycontins. They're high dosages. He starts noticing it's the same doctor prescribing these medications. We learn the reason why those 3 medications were actually prescribed together. Then we learn more about the doctor, about the fact that she started off as a pediatrician and then moved into pain management. That's right. She started off as a pediatrician and then moved into pain management. And so one of his patients, he was able to have a conversation with and was just like, you know, this isn't a good look. This is dangerous. His patient saw that he was going down a bad road. And so he shared, yes, I need some help. He went and got off of the medications. And Dan essentially was like, hey, can you help me and explain to me how this doctor is? What do you know about this doctor? Because she's continually writing these prescriptions. And he was like, his patient's like, yeah, I can tell you that's what she does. She sits here and you go in there and she will sit there and fill out these medications for whatever. You don't even have to tell her. You don't even have to have a conversation with her. She's already writing out these medications, this prescription for some Oxycontin and the other 2 medications. And it was just like, oh my goodness, like I was tripping because with this epidemic going on right now, you always hear about doctors who they just didn't care. The reason why we're so strict now is because there was doctors out there that didn't care. They were just signing these prescriptions. They were just giving them to people. You always hear about it. When I was seeing this doctor, her name was Dr. Cleggett. When I was seeing this doctor and what they were finding out on in this docu-series, got flashbacks to when this all was happening in real time. A lot of it started happening in 1999, early 2000s. I'm in my teenage years then. So it's like, oh, this stuff, I do remember people making it such a big deal about these doctors. These doctors were getting busted for just writing out these prescriptions, and this was a documentary about one of those doctors, and I was tripping because it was just an eye-opening experience for me to see like that was real. They really didn't care. Dan got tired. He got tired, okay? So him and his wife are like, let's go figure this out. They go sit down in the parking lot. It's 2 a.m. and they see this doctor is full-blown in business, open, people lined up outside, and he's like, okay, no, this can't be legit. And back then, these were called pill mills. These were just doctors who were just signing prescriptions for you, get you in, charge you a flat fee. Here's these meds. You go and fill them out at a pharmacy, and you had your medications. And it was such high dosages, you could not see how the epidemic we're still in, why we're still in it, because you're giving them high dosage of Oxycontin, just starting them out. First time you've ever had it. You haven't tried any other pain medications before. Your first dosage is 40 milligrams. 40 milligrams of Oxycontin, that's dangerous. And they share testimonies from different people. So it's like, I'm not going too deep with you guys because I do want you to go watch it. But they did share testimony of people, or people were understanding and learning tricks, and it was crazy. So Dan then decides to go ahead and contact authorities and let them know what was going on. He's like, I contacted the FBI. I contacted them, letting them know that this is going on. They need to check into these people. He contacted the DEA and was like, hey, you need to check into this doctor. I don't know if you're paying any attention. And he said they just showed him out the door and was like, bye. And what was great about it was the DEA pops up and we're like, yeah, we've already been looking into that doctor. We've been looking to her for over a year. And they shared some crazy stats, okay, you guys? They said that every patient that went in to see her, she would basically charge $250 for you to get to see her and get her medications. She made almost $2 million. She deposited cash into her actual bank. So we don't even know what she might not have deposited. But from what she put into the bank, she made
almost $2 million.
Doing what she was doing. Just filling out these prescriptions. Young, old, it did not matter. And that was eye-opening. That was crazy because it's one of those moments like, well, no wonder. I now understand why it's so bad now. Why we're still having this epidemic. It's still happening. We're still in it. And this started right after the crack epidemic. Next thing you know, you have doctors just like this Dr. Cleggett shilling out, being a pill mill, just shilling out all of these medications at high dosages, not caring. You had the money, you got the medication, and that's trash. That is why it's so hard for my clients now. They need medications, and it was crazy because this is an ongoing issue. This is going to continue to be an ongoing issue because they even stated back then that people who are suffering pain, people who are living with chronic pain, were having issues getting medications and were looked at like addicts and were just trying to get high. And I'm still dealing with that today with my clients who legitimately have chronic illnesses, chronic pain every day, just want to have a decent quality of life and are still looked at that way. We're being harder now, and they're still getting looked at now because of the things that happened in the 90s, early 2000s. Like, this is one doctor who sat here and literally made almost $2 million in 1 year from just shilling out medication, high prescriptions of OxyContin, of opioids, and then benzos on top of it, and then muscle relaxants on top of it. You literally set these people up. She set these people up, and she wasn't the only one. And that's what's sad, is she wasn't the only one. There were so many, and there still are I don't think there's that many now because rules have gotten strict. But I still feel like there's still some that could be, maybe there's some out there that could be caught still.
I don't know. I'm not everywhere.
It was really honestly a good view of what the power of one crooked doctor has in a community. You saw the community just drop from her prescribing. You noticed more overdoses. Their overdoses had gone up. Like, one doctor in that area had caused that much damage. Imagine all the other doctors. And they only named a few. So we get into episode 3. So at the end of episode 2, we're finding out how much this doctor has made. The doctor is named Dr. Cleggett. So then again, we are reminded the DA had been already looking into this doctor. And back then we didn't have electronics like that. So they had to go to each pharmacy to see what prescriptions were there. And it was hard and it took a long time because she would have people coming from different states to get prescriptions from her. They shared that they came from Florida. This is located in Louisiana. Remember that. They came from Florida, Tennessee, Georgia, Mississippi, Alabama. Were coming over to get some medication from her. But they were only able to go to 10 pharmacies and saw that she had prescribed over 180,000 OxyContin pills. And that's only in 10 pharmacies. And they speculated she actually gave out more than 1 million. One doctor, like, you literally sat here and you contributed to this horrible epidemic we're still living in and didn't care. You wanted your money. All it was about was your money. And then they started getting deeper into the pharmaceutical company named Purdue, who makes this medication, who knew that they had crooked doctors out there, and that was where they were getting the most of their revenue. And they framed it as it was less addictive because it was an extended release tablet. They really sat there and lied to people. They lied to their representatives. They told this to their doctors, saying because it's an extended release, it's not as addictive. Then they lied about what addiction was. They tried to really sit here and say, oh no, what the patients are going through when they don't have any more of their OxyContin, it's not an actual addiction. It's just a physical addiction, of a sign of like a withdrawal. It's from the pain. It's not from the medication. You just need to re-prescribe that medication and they'll feel better.
Like, what are you talking about?
You just explained addiction. You just explained someone going through withdrawal. Like, what? What? And they really tried to lie about how addictive these medications were, which ultimately helped fuel the doctors to continue to just prescribe them, even though everyone knows, and most doctors know, they were already hesitant in prescribing opioids because of the other opioid epidemics we had in this country. We had them twice before.
Watch the documentary and they'll let you know about when that was too.
So you were already hesitant, but now because you had a pharmaceutical company saying, hey, guess what? It's extended release, so that makes it less addictive, and they lie about what the addictive feeling is. You have these doctors saying, okay, well then if I can get people in here and come to see me and fill out these medications, they were filling those medications out. Especially the ones who weren't doing it for a good reason, who were just in it for the money. And we got to see that. We got to see how these pharmaceutical companies, a deeper understanding of how they were just lying to their representatives. They were lying to the world, saying that this isn't as addictive because of this, and what you might feel, it might be a sign of withdrawal, but it's not addiction. They said it was pseudo addiction, that you really weren't addicted, you just needed more medication. I'm just like, oh my gosh, you guys really didn't care. And this is what happens because let me not get on my soapbox about capitalism. I'm not. Like, that whole episode just pissed me off. It really pissed me off because it really showed how much the pharmaceutical companies didn't give a shit. It really showed how some doctors didn't care. This woman had cops working with her. And it just made me think of all the other doctors that are out there that probably behaved the same way. You did the same thing, behaved the way that she did, prescribed the way that she did, and just didn't care. And it made me admire Dan more because he actually sat down and was looking at these prescriptions and saw something wasn't right and wanted to do something about it. It pissed me off that the government agencies were, I get that they have to be closed-lipped and you can't know about, what investigations going on and all that, whatever. But I felt like he helped a lot. As much as they swear to goodness he was crazy, and yes, he did get in some chances of getting hurt and things like that. He did risk his life a lot. I feel like he was ultimately the thing that helped break all of these cases, point blank, period. If he wasn't the one who consistently kept on it and kept looking and kept searching and kept trying to get information and ultimately contacting other locations in the US that were going through the same thing. And like, there was a doctor in Ohio who got caught for the same thing. He calls up there and was like, hey, what you do to get that man?
What did you do to get him?
And the prosecutor was like, we contacted the medical board and they helped. And he did that. He contacted the medical board and got the whole investigation started. It started opening people's eyes that doctors don't know everything. They're not just the final word when it comes to medications, when it comes to someone's treatment. And they started looking into it. And when that happened, boom, she got shut down on Valentine's Day 2002. And I was happy to see that. Because it was like justice. It's like someone was taking this seriously and we were able to, at least one of the doctors, off the streets. Because who knows how many there were out there at that time. But it was very eye-opening to see, like, this is what was going on. This is how some of these doctors behaved. It put an eye onto the pharmaceutical companies and the shady practices they did. They even had representatives that worked for the pharmaceutical companies who would go to the doctors' offices who started to notice themselves like, oh, you guys are getting your money from these type of doctors. Okay, I have to just have those type of doctors then. It was all built to just make money. There was nothing about helping anyone. And as much as they tried to frame it that they were helping people, that's not what it was about. So then you have episode 4, which is the last episode, right? I was tripping because the doctor, Dr. Claggett, decided she was going to join the actual documentary. No longer a doctor, but she joined the documentary, and it came out that she was actually hospitalized because she was addicted to the opioids as well. well. So they shared that a lot of these doctors, sometimes they do get caught up into the life. Yes, they're prescribing, but they start using themselves. And she just was like, no, I wasn't addicted. No, I was helping people. She does not take any accountability for the things that she's done. She does not think she harmed anybody. They even asked her about the people that passed away from her prescriptions. They were like, do you even think about the people that died or might have overdosed from you prescribing these medications? And she was just like, if there are some, like, she didn't care. To her, she did nothing wrong. So that kind of was a wow moment for me, where I was like, she didn't care. She didn't care then when she was giving out these medications. She doesn't seem to care now. She did have a really bad car accident, which might have explained why she spoke the way she did or behaved the way she did. So I will give her that, because part of me felt like that's cold-hearted if you really didn't care, but maybe that plays a big part in it. She pled guilty with the medical board, which made her lose her license, but there wasn't anything federal at that time. So Dan felt good. He was able to get that doctor off of, the streets, or at least out of his community, but he also knew that it didn't stop anything. A lot of it was still happening. A lot of doctors were still, giving out this medication unless it was moved to a bigger platform. So then he still kept speaking out. He went on different engagements. He was talking on the news. He was trying to get the word out about what happened in his area. So then, of course, you already know, the little man get it started, but it took the big news. It took a big magazine, Time magazine, to talk about it, to bring it to the forefront, to get on the news nationally, for people to actually have a big conversation and understand that something was going on. But Dan, the actual pharmacist, does get credit for bringing attention and trying to fight the epidemic 10 years before it was declared an epidemic nationally. He literally helped. He started in, I believe, 2001, and it took until 2011, 2012 for it to be declared nationally an epidemic. And that entire time he was working and trying to help his community, but would ultimately lead to some change in the actual country. And so the documentary ended with them talking about Purdue, which was the pharmaceutical company behind OxyContin. Once we all started catching on to what they were doing and the trouble and the damage that Purdue had caused with their medication, with their lies, with lying in Congress in the 90s, and then coming back and having to admit that they lied during that time as well, states started suing them, and they ended up getting sued for millions of dollars. They couldn't handle it, with almost every state suing them for damages for the things that they did with their medications, the lies that they did. They couldn't handle it, and they ended up going bankrupt. And what was crazy to find out is that Purdue, the company that made OxyContin,
and lied about it and said it wasn't as addictive as it was, and that people were feeling pseudo addiction
and all of that, we come to find out that they were actually thinking of going into treatment to help people with addiction. Like, what? So what? Oh, I'm so happy. Oh, I'm so happy that they ended up getting shut down, because that is just straight trash. Like, what were you doing? And this is all just recently. This all happened in 2019, where all the states were starting to, sue this company. So again, this is an ongoing thing. This started late 1990s, early 2000s to now. We're talking about, what is that, 20 years? We're dealing with this still. And this company was just getting sued by the states last year, 2019. They shared that for 75% of the people who were in treatment or who were seeking treatment for heroin, their first taste of opioids was from prescriptions. During this time, they were just giving them to everyone. And the fact that it took them this long to get sued for the damage that you did, the way that you did this to this country, to all these people, because again, it's addiction. It didn't care how much money you had, where you were living, what skin tone you had on your body. This hit everybody, and it's still going. And I give him props. I give Dan Schneider props, the pharmacist from this documentary, mad props, because he started his whole crusade 10 years before anybody else did. Just imagine if we would have listened, if people were paying attention in those first 10 years like he was, where we could be at now. And I thank Unmumsy Musings, Joe, I thank you for asking me to watch this, because as someone who deals with my clients every day trying to get help, seeing how blatantly easy it was back then for these people to get medications, I kind of want to calm down and be like, hey, I get why you do it, because we need to be safe and we need to make sure. But then I still feel that whole stigma of pain is just continuing as well. It's literally that saying of being stuck between a rock and a hard place. We really are, because we were cautious prior. We didn't want to fall back into another opioid epidemic. Like, we had this issue before. People became cautious. People weren't giving medications. You had people who would essentially, I guess, be like my clients, talking about chronic illness, talking about chronic pain, being in pain, not having a great quality of life. Doctors are looking at them like, oh, you're just an addict, you just want meds, da 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 da. And then you have a company come and say, hey, this is not as addictive and it helps your people who needs meds. We're going to comfort these people. These doctors are just giving them to them. So we have this huge epidemic to where now we're back in the beginning of the cycle again, where it's now people aren't listening to the people who are hurt, because guess what? You're all addicts. You all are just going to abuse the medications. And I'm like, oh my God, history repeats itself. When they say history repeats itself, history flipping repeats itself, because it's like, where have we progressed then? Where have we really progressed? There are some progressions that I am going to state that I liked. I liked that they showed it in this documentary as well, is the drug monitoring system. Now all of it is electronic, to where if we flag you, we flag you. And I've had to flag clients myself. And the reason we have been able to do that is because of this type of situation where they started pushing the drug monitoring system, making it more electronic, making it easier for pharmacies and people to talk to. I love that. That is something that we have some progress on. But honestly, I'm like, where else? Because now we're in the fentanyl stage. We're still in this epidemic. It's just moved to fentanyl now. It's heroin and fentanyl. That's what we hear about a lot. Yes, prescription drugs are still there too, but from what was going on from this documentary, we see a great example of the reason why it's cracked down so hard. But I'm also just like, I don't see any great progress, because it's still hurting those who still need help. And it made me so upset, because I saw doctors who didn't care. I saw this woman did not care, and how many other ones were out there. They showed maybe 4 of the arrests of other doctors, which I know there might have been more. There might have been way more. But the damage was done by that time. How many people have died? How many people were now struggling with addiction? How many people were still locked up in jail because they had addiction from getting overprescribed prescription narcotics, medications, opioids? They're in jail. We're fueling all these different things. We're fueling people with addiction. We're fueling the prison complex, because you started these people on this path of addiction, and now they're in jail because they couldn't afford to keep that addiction up. You're charging $250 for these people to come in and get medications that they could die from. There are too many examples in this documentary of people just taking their medication that they're prescribed and overdosing. Like, this was such a good documentary, but it pissed me off so bad, because we are still living in it. We are still living in this epidemic, and we're still dealing with it on a day-to-day basis. I still have clients who want a good quality of life, who are hurting, who are not being heard because we're in that epidemic. It's like, it's a rock and a hard place, because it's like, what can we do to help, and what conversations do we need to have to actually have long-lasting effects, where we're not just repeating the same cycle over and over and over again. And it showed that this is a long time for us to still be trying to figure out what to do. It was eye-opening that this woman sat here and she prescribed such high dosages. She gave such high dosages and didn't care. And that showed that sometimes we do still give these doctors a pedestal. We put these doctors on a pedestal, and they stated that in the documentary as well, is that a lot of times the reason people didn't want to move is because what a doctor says about medications is seen as gold. They studied this, they should know. Like, this whole documentary was so great. I feel like Dan did a great job. I think, yes, he was a little vigilante in some parts of it, but I could kind of empathize and understand, like, hey, he lost his son. I would probably acted the same way then. And then I also know if I'm a pharmacist and I'm seeing these prescriptions coming in, I'm going to say something about it too. I'm going to try to do something as well. I felt like it showed a great intimate view of what it might have looked like throughout this entire country. Like, it's not just Louisiana. It wasn't just focusing on that one state. It was sharing and showing what that was like basically around the entire country. And I thought that was I think it's something that people should watch, so that they can understand and get a better understanding of what happened and why we still continue to battle this epidemic that we're dealing with. We had doctors just out here shilling out medications taking cash, putting money in their pockets. They had police helping them stay out of trouble. You had people who were maybe legitly in pain at one time who are now addicted. You had people dying and no one knew or wanted to do anything for a very long time. And I think it's awesome that Dan was thinking about it and trying to do something 10 years before the nation decided to do something, before the nation decided to take it serious. And I'm sad because we are still dealing with it to this day. I'm sad because I don't feel like we've made a lot of progress as we should. I truly think that it will get better, that if we take it seriously and we really start working locally, like he showed, just working locally can be important. And I took away from it that if we really want to, you know, help do something about this opioid epidemic that we're in, let's start locally. Let's start locally and see what we can do, what laws we can put into place, what funding may still be needed. But he did a lot just locally in his area. And I think that is a great lesson that can be taught as well. This documentary was off and there's so much I could have talked about. I feel like this is going to be a really long video for me to edit, but it was a great documentary, or docu-series as they call it. I enjoyed it. It's something I would recommend to everyone just to get a, you know, up close and personal inside look as to what it looked like during those times when the epidemic first came out, when the opioid epidemic first started. Look, it gives you an idea of what the pharmaceutical company is saying, what the doctors were doing, and just one man trying to stop it. And I think it's a great documentary. I definitely give it 2 thumbs up. Think it's awesome. But I want to hear from you guys. Let me know, have you watched this docu-series on Netflix? Have you guys seen The Pharmacist? If not, do you plan on watching it? I want to hear from you guys. If you did make it this far and haven't subscribed, don't be afraid to hit that subscribe button down below. Hit the bell so that way you're notified every time I post a video. Hit the thumbs up if you enjoyed this video. If you want me to do another review on a show or topic, let me know down in the comments. I will look at it, and if it's something that will interest me, I just might watch it and review it for you guys. Don't be afraid to check out my Patreon at patreon.com/journey-to-find-K. Still got that special on. Check out my tiers, check out my perks. I thank you guys though, no matter what, just for watching, liking, commenting, subscribing. That is support, and I thank you from the bottom of my heart for all of that. I will catch you guys in my next video. Bye.